Welcome to Rewiring Health. If you're a high-achieving woman feeling trapped in the endless cycle of guilt and exhaustion from always putting others first, then this is your sanctuary. I'm Dr. Kelly Kessler, your dedicated empowerment mentor, and I'm here to tell you that it's time to reclaim your peace, health, and happiness. Imagine waking up every day feeling energized and unapologetically living for yourself. Together, we'll break down the walls that have been holding you back and unlock the vibrant, unstoppable force that you truly are. It's time to put yourself first, embrace your authentic self, and live a life that's not just endured, but celebrated. Now let's dive in. Have you ever noticed your skin reflects your stress? I used to struggle with mine, dry, dull, reactive, until I started pairing nervous system regulation with products that actually honor your body. That's why I love Milk and Butterflies. They handcraft every formula with 100% organic ingredients and powerful aromatherapy oils. They aren't just products for your skin, they're rituals that restore hydration, resilience, and calm even in the busiest seasons of our life. You can try them for yourself and feel the difference. Head to Milk and Butterflies and use my promo code Dr. Kelly for free shipping. That's DRKELLY for free shipping. Also, check out the link in the description for the podcast. As we age, our bodies inevitably change, but it doesn't mean we sit around feeling complacent and not doing anything about it. It's an opportunity to be proactive and optimize our health. And that's why I'm so honored to have Zane Griggs on the podcast today. Zane Griggs has been helping people improve their metabolic health and fitness as a personal trainer since 1998. He is the host of the documentary Animal, author of Kicking Ass After 50, and host of the Healthy After 50 podcast. Zane delivers integrative health strategies to help his clients perform at a high level and meet the demands of life at any age. What I loved about this conversation with Zane is that he not only provides practical strategies for making tremendous shifts in our health, but he also shares the impacts on our metabolism, our hormones, and how we can navigate this as we age. This was such a wonderful conversation, and it will leave you feeling empowered and understanding the importance of taking control of your health today. Well, welcome, Zane Griggs. I am so honored to have you on the podcast today. This is going to be such a great conversation. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I would love to start with, and I think really resonates with people, is stories. So I would love to hear your story. Can you just talk about, where you started and maybe some of the evolution of where you've gone, what you've gone through and where you are today?
Oh, wow. We're going back pretty far there. So really in my early mid-20s, I noticed that my uncles were, I have three older uncles that were my dad's older brothers that were really struggling with metabolic disease, primarily heart disease or stroke. One had diabetes on top of it. My dad really wasn't struggling, being the youngest, but he still, when he got to their age, he didn't have those same issues. And he had always taken care of himself, and as well as we knew to do in the 70s and 80s. And at that point in the 90s when, he paid attention. He exercised, he paid attention to how he ate. And so I knew there was a way to avoid metabolic disease. And for some reason in my 20s, that kind of sense of mortality with this disease hit me. And I started experimenting. I'd been really regularly working out since college. But I started playing with diets, including I started with like the vegetarian, even times vegan diet. I'd done 7-day juice fasts, start really reading. And back then we didn't have the internet so at our fingertips at all. I mean, it was the early 90s. I was making my own almond milk because it wasn't in the stores. So something got in me to saying I can figure out a way to avoid metabolic disease, because this doesn't seem right to me. This seems like it's something we should be able to avoid. And I saw an example of it in the contrast between my dad and his brothers. And that led me down a path of continuing to experiment and explore. I became a trainer just a few years later in 98. Within a few years after that, my wife had gone through, by 2002 or so, she had her third child, struggling to lose some weight. we tried Atkins or so super low carb diet, and it worked. And so that kind of made a resurgence at the time, but in the mainstream, that seemed very extreme, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so that was something where I started exploring low carb as a for my playing with myself mostly as a tool for my weight loss clients. 2010 started playing with intermittent fasting personally, fasted workouts, and then kind of helping some of my clients who were willing to take that on because most of my clients wanted to lose weight.
Mhm.
And then at some point, as I got in my late 40s, after about 8 or 10 years of that kind of lifestyle, kind of low carb, lots of intermittent fasting, fasted workouts, I hit a wall. I hit this wall of like, I'm run down. Like, this isn't working. Why isn't this working? And I look at my blood work. Thyroid didn't look the way it should. TSH was really high. A lot of stress hormone, like SHB, sex hormone binding globulin, was high, which I knew was impacting testosterone levels. Um, and I wasn't sleeping well, so I knew elevated, again, another sign of elevated cortisol. Wasn't um, wasn't recovering from my workout, so I felt like I was fatigued and almost like a little bit of burn all the time, even when I wasn't exercising, and just generally run down, overtrained, and realized underfed, underfueled, had been over leveraging these stressors, these metabolic stressors. On top of the fact that at this point, 4 kids, um, and a career, and just doing life, right?
Mhm.
Those stressors all count. Those stressors have a count that things that didn't impact you in your 20s that you didn't have, right? Like the career and the family plus age and hormone levels diminishing, growth hormone, sex hormones diminishing. Uh, those stressors of life make a difference, and they count as much as your workout. And so my workout was stressing me out. The lack of nutrients, in my work, in my diet, all of those things were compiled into I'm overtaxing my nervous system, my neurohormonal really system, and it was catching up with me. And I had to really take a step back and say, what am I doing? Because all these tools, all these things I thought were good, they're probably good in small amounts, or maybe they're good in at the right time for a certain period. But I was over leveraging all of these, like dieting harder, working out harder, doing everything harder, harder, harder on top of my responsibilities. And it just didn't, it wasn't working.
Mhm.
And I had to hit a wall to realize that and really assess, like, oh my gosh, this is my mantra. This is what I tell everybody to do. And here I am failing at it. Um, and I really had to step back and say, what am I missing here? And dig in, start listening to other voices, start looking for other uh, resources of information about the impact of metabolic stress and recovery and the impact that has on thyroid and metabolism in general, sex hormones and so forth, and think about digging into things around hormone replacement therapy as well, not to mask symptoms that need to be fixed, but to once your lifestyle is nailed down, like realize at some point you need some help. We can get a little help. We don't need to mask poor lifestyle symptoms, and we want to get the lifestyle habits down, get those foundational habits down. But we can leverage that as we get older with some of these integrative strategies to help us keep performing at the high level we want to, but without overdoing it, without um, over leveraging, over taxing our system. So we really can be there. We're not exhausted at the end of the day. We still have something left to give to our family, to our spouse, to our kids, to the things we really want to do beyond work, in case we have some of those. And so that's my long-winded story, but it's been 3 decades of experimentation, a lot of trial and error, with a lot of learning from the error and digging into research, seeing patterns and realizing, okay, this matches up with what I'm seeing in my life and my client's life, and having to make adjustments and sometimes, like reassess my whole theory on how we're supposed to eat and move and live with at an optimal level. Like, what does optimal health really look like And it's not always about, doing things harder, you know.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my little path through this to this point. 54, um, and I feel like if I could go back to my younger self, I'd have a lot to teach him.
Mhm. I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story because there are so many things that you said that were so relatable. And that story of telling yourself, I have to do more, I have to go harder. And it's like a trap that we can get very much stuck in. And then we compare our current self to our 20 self. And you're like, well, I'm not what I used to
Right.
be. What's wrong with me? Why can't I keep up with that version of me? And then it's like this cycle we get into that's vicious and it just leaves us feeling empty. And so I appreciate you sharing your journey. And one thing that I would love for you to speak on is because we can often use our age as like kind of an excuse, like, well, I'm
For
40,
sure.
so doesn't this happen to everybody who's 40 or I'm 50? Doesn't the body, a quote, break down? I hear that from so many people. Oh, things are breaking down. Can you talk about those excuses that we might say or, things that beliefs that we have versus being our own advocate and being proactive about taking our health into our own hands at that point?
Sure. Being older, you do things smarter, not harder, ideally, and you're doing that probably in your career or with your family. You become wiser and more efficient because you don't have the energy and the hormones to waste. Right? You have your resources. Let's just think of it this way: your resources are limited, a little more limited than were in your 20s, but that makes you have to budget better with your energy, with what you're paying attention to, with how you treat yourself, with the sleep that you make sure you get, the recovery, and then having eyes on biomarkers like that. Sometimes your doctor is not looking at, like not just the T4 in the thyroid, but looking at TSH, T4, T3, maybe reverse T3 to see if your thyroid is actually converting into the energy that you need. Uh, Looking at sex hormones, get a baseline, even if you're not symptomatic yet. Where are you at 40? So that when you get to 45, 50, oh, that has changed. This is changing. It's moving in a direction that I might want to address. I found a lot of women long before menopause, probably right around sometimes late 30s, early 40s, depending on the stress level and the career and the individual, their testosterone starts dropping around that time where they may benefit from supplementation. Others can sometimes wait till late 40s, depending on what they want to do and how they feel. And that's very individual, especially women, I think more so than men. You go a lot by feel and symptom and not just the ranges. But your doctor may not have an idea of what the optimal ranges are. So you need to know, as being your own advocate, as you said, understand what the optimal ranges are for thyroid, for sex hormones, right? That it's not about being normal for your age, because once you're past 40, you really don't want to be normal for your age. You want to be in great shape. But
Yeah.
when it comes to hormone markers and biomarkers, you don't want to be the average of everyone else for your age. And unfortunately, the biomarkers and a lot of the blood work that your doctor's using, it's just an average of the population. Let's take a look around. The average of the population in the US is sick. So to fit into the range of average or sick is not my goal. And so knowing those optimal ranges for testosterone, for estrogen, progesterone, some of those menopausal, when you're menopausal and you're targeting those are pretty locked in, but there's some variation for it. But like testosterone, thyroid, you want to know what's ideal for you, and it may not be what's ideal for your friend, and it may not be what your doctor thinks is ideal.
Mhm.
And so understanding that there might be a little bit of education and trial and error with that for yourself, but it's worth it because your performance can be increased exponentially. I've talked to so many women who, once they get testosterone on board, long before the menopausal, they're like, "Oh, I remember this version of myself. I feel so much better. I have so much, the brain fog's gone, the energy's back, the libido's back." Um, there. I have one who's a singer, a client who's a singer, and she's in her 50s now, and she adds testosterone back. She says, "I haven't hit these notes since my 30s." She's hitting high C's and notes that she hasn't because her voice and her vocal cords are recovering and they have the strength to hit those now. She's still performing. And so there's a there's I always recommend the foundations, get the diet, exercise, and the recovery in there. Those are foundational. And then we can build on those with other things like peptides and hormones. But the start looking at the biomarkers that are indicators that start to move as you age, so you at least know where you are, and then and be aware of the choices you have to enhance those if you choose to. You have a say in it because you've educated yourself. You've become your advocate, because again, these doctors have stopped being trained on hormone replacement, for instance, because since the Women's Health Initiative was probably one of the biggest tragedies to hit women's health. It was the first study we had on women who weren't pregnant. So we had studies on pregnant women. First study ever was in the 90s for women's health, which is ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah.
And then they had this study that was so flawed, and they created this big press conference around this very flawed study that scared the crap out of everybody, including doctors. And then suddenly, after hormone replacement had been taught med school, practiced by doctors for like 2 decades, suddenly stopped. And we've got a whole almost generation of women, at least 20 years women, who are now in their 60s plus, who have missed out on the opportunity and the education and the offer to improve their hormone health, which could, as we're seeing more and more now, greatly reduce the risk of disease, heart disease, osteoporosis, and neurodegenerative disorders. So among other things, not to mention muscle mass, sex drive, maybe a happier marriage. So that I think this is why it's so important to note, to not just abdicate this authority and this understanding to your doctor or your NP, but really, like you said, become your own advocate and understand what your targets are, and know what you need or what you want to try, at least, to see what you can do to optimize your health. Again, another long-winded answer, but I deal with this all the time, and it's we're not in a place where we can continue to just let someone else completely manage our health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate you saying that. And that is something that can go so under the radar when we have a slow erosion of our health. We may not even realize it, or we normalize it. Like, this is just how it is. This is how all people. So I appreciate you sharing, like, don't compare yourself to the standard, because that's not where you want to be. You want to be your best version of yourself, and only you
Yeah.
know what that feels like. So I so appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a message that needs to be heard, because we've normalized illness and lack of
Mm-hmm.
health, especially in this country. And we just, mask it with more medication and think that that's going to be the long-term solution. So I appreciate you sharing all that you shared. One thing I want to go back to is
Sure.
talking about the metabolic impacts and that, like, high intensity of feeling like we have to do more. Can you
Right.
talk about that, and that how that impacts our system, and why more might not always be better, and how we really can optimize that for ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. That's a big deal with exercise. Not just diet, not just over dieting and under fueling, but with exercise, I think we're seeing this more and more. Women are more sensitive to metabolic stress, whether it's from exercise or diet, like fasting, than men are, for good reason. It's because your bodies are made to bring a life into this world. It's a superpower, but in order to do that, to be in that state, to do that, your body doesn't want to be in a calorie deficit. It doesn't want to be under stress. Doesn't want to be in a state of starvation. That's not a good time to bring a life into the world. That's not a good time to have extra resources being devoted to building another human. And so when women are in that extreme calorie deficit or metabolic stress, physical stress, that's a hormonal signal to the body, like, hey, we got to adjust some things here. And the way it adjusts things is it adjusts hormones. It can elevate cortisol. If they're premenopausal, it's going to definitely could have an impact on the other sex hormones and how they're regulated. And I think with cortisol, though, is the big one that applies to all women in whatever age, which can have an impact on fat storage, on stress management, of just how you feel, how well you sleep. With cortisol, when it's elevated, you are now breaking down, you're releasing more sugar from the liver, and breaking down fatty acids to be put into the bloodstream. And that may sound like a good thing, but it creates a stress response because let's say you're underfed or haven't eaten, and then you go to a hard workout. Um, you're getting a chemical energy, not a true. I mean, yes, there's nutrients being released, but that what that signals is, hey, we need to show up for next time. So you have elevated cortisol, which is tied directly to increased abdominal fat, especially in women, but men and women both. Women just seem to be more sensitive again to the cortisol level. So um, fasted workouts or super intense, long extended, high intensity workouts can really elevate this, and they're not necessary for making progress with your fitness. For instance, with strength training, this is how I work out now, doing a lot fewer sets than I ever used to. And it's not just because of my age; it's just smarter and looking at history of how did people lift before steroids, and realizing how much our current exercise recommendations are influenced by a steroid infused fitness industry. Was full body workouts 3 times a week with rest in between, 1 or 2 sets per exercise. Maybe you did somewhere between 12, 14, 15 total sets, close to failure. Maybe someone went to failure, someone went 1 or 2 reps of failure, but this is where I train, is between 1 and 2 reps of failure. 12 to 15 total sets, getting a little bit of everything, but frequency. So not fewer sets, less volume, so less inflammation, creating a minimal effective dose of stimulus for muscle growth or muscle retention or strength, and then hitting that more frequently. And current studies actually back that up as a much more efficient way that limits inflammation and limits overtraining. With 1 or 2 sets of a movement, of one movement is getting the majority of your stimulus for that muscle growth or strength. And so getting that full body workout a few times a week, you can make progress in strength and muscle retention. Again, with limited inflammation, you don't have to beat yourself up and be sore for 3 days. A little bit of like a high intensity, like a sprint type stuff. We maybe have a 10-second, 30-second, maybe at most a 60-second all out effort, as much as you can handle a few times, but when you're fueled up, when you feel good, that could be once a week, maybe every 10 days. And then a lot of very zone one, like very low level zone one, maybe zone two, staying in that zone two heart rate or lower, where you're getting maximal benefit from fat burning. You're training a different muscle fiber group, which is ideal for fat burning for building mitochondria, and it's building that fat burning efficiency for which is what's happening through most of your day, right? When you're at your job, you're doing things around the house, you're out, running your errands. You're in that zone one, zone two, burning fat ideally because you're using those type 1 muscles mostly. And so that is where there's a great deal of benefit with a lot of that low level work that doesn't fatigue you, can actually help with recovery. You're not going to be overly sore or worn out from it. Your intense part of your workouts are very short, very succinct parts of your week and your workout, so that again, you're getting the benefit, but without wearing yourself out, stimulating appetite beyond what you really need, and keeping those cortisol levels in check. And the fasted workouts, I think, is just fueling the fire for the same thing. I think I recommend most of the women I speak to have a little something. You may work out first thing in the morning, have a little something, have a little Greek yogurt and half a banana or something. If it's just something you can easily digest, to get some fuel, to tell your body, hey, we have resources, we have fuel. This doesn't have to be an overly stressful event, just enough to get something in there before you work out, and then have your full breakfast after. But keep cortisol levels as low as possible through that, and don't feel like you have to like lay yourself out. When you're done with your workout, you're supposed to be laid out on the floor or just completely exhausted and drenched. And that's just not that doesn't seem like a healthy, at this point in retrospect, looking back at the patterns and everything I've kind of seen over the last 30 years. That is not ideal. It may happen here and there, and you may enjoy blowing it out on a weekend or something, but that should not be a regular event throughout your week.
Yeah.
in my opinion, and from what I'm seeing, and it just
Mhm.
especially for women.
Yeah, I feel like it's like very reassuring for women just to hear this because it's like that all or nothing that you can very much hear. Like either I am in it 7 days a week or I'm just gonna sit here because if I can't do it 7 days a week, like why do it? So it's like hearing from you and saying that like listen, like 3 solid days of like a whole body workout is enough, and that's really
Yeah,
reassuring. And
yeah,
one thing as you were speaking, talking about like the sprints, I forget the statistic, but I saw it the other day. I think it was like 80% of people after the age of 39 will never sprint again or something.
right.
It's mind blowing, but like, and you can see that where those type 2 fibers just
Yeah,
eventually
those are
disintegrate.
the ones we lose.
Yeah,
Those are the ones we lose to type 2 fibers,
right,
as
exactly.
we
And then,
age.
yeah. And then now we're not able to, and that, that's all that safety stuff later on. So it's so powerful. And then I just want, because, I was a trainer years ago, and this is one thing I
Hmm.
always heard from women. I just want you to speak on it. But there are so many women that say, like, well, I don't want to be really big. I don't want a lot of muscles. But can you speak on, they just wanted to do cardio. And that was like a big limiting factor because they thought if they lifted, they would get bigger. But I mean, lifting is where it's at. That is where you have that ability to really be vibrant and have
Right.
longevity of life. Can you talk about that and what the importance of lifting, and also talk about the importance you mentioned to fatigue, why it has to be fatigue and not just, do
Oh, right.
15,
Do your
18.
set of 12 with 5 pounders and
Yeah,
like put it
right,
down when you're
exactly.
feeling.
Where
Stop
you
it.
just check it off the list, you did it. It's not that either.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's we every muscle is as some have quoted it, called it the more organ of longevity, and that's because of the for movement, for protecting you from a fall, which everybody falls at some point. Just when you get older, it'll put you in the hospital. And for as a glucose sink, muscle is a glucose sink, meaning that you store glucose, glycogen, energy in those muscles. Your body's going to need to store a certain amount of energy on it. Do you want it going to muscle cell or fat cells? There's one big choice right there. Where do you want your energy going? Where do you want to train your body to store the energy it needs to keep on board? You've got two choices. It's in muscle or it's in fat cells. Not that you're going to have a little bit of both, but where do you want the majority of it going? And by working out by resistance training, trains your body to store fuel in those muscles. Now, as a female, you have while you do have 10 times more testosterone in your body than you do estrogen, you have at least 10 times less testosterone in your body than a male does, which is what's responsible for a lot of the growth from muscle. So you're not going to look like a guy unless you're taking on some extra hormones by and large. And when you do lift that, understand that even if your weight stayed the same, you would be more compact if you're shifting, your composition is changing from subcutaneous fat into muscle, right? So as you lift and more of your energy is being stored in muscle, even at the same weight, you're going to be smaller, you're going to be more compact because more that weight is more dense in the muscle. You're going to have more energy and you're going to have stronger bones because those bones is a leverage of those muscles as you're lifting weights against pulling on their bones, which is their anchor point, that's creating the density, the tension in those bones to tell your body, hey, we need more minerals in these bones. They have to handle more weight. They have to handle more work. Let's put some let's put some minerals in these bones and strengthen them, make them more dense. So you're building your resistance to osteoporosis. You're building up your muscle mass for when hormones start changing, and after 60, it becomes more difficult to build. And you're building a backstop against insulin resistance, meaning metabolic disease, because you're training your body to store fuel, to store glucose in those muscles. Plus, you just look better. You're more solid. You're not going to get large like a guy unless you're taking some extra supplementations to get there. But by and large, the very rare female that can really pack on and then they're going to have you. You're going to be in the octagon, hitting somebody. You're going to be, like it's very rare those women come through and they're pulled up to be athletes. So your average female, you're not going to build into a man's body, and you would have to be intentional about it in order to accomplish that. You're not going to do that by lifting a few times a week. You can build sufficient muscle to make you athletic looking, but you're not going to be hulked up unless that is your intent. And again, the long term benefits are. I mean, they're documented. It's not just speculation. It's not just observation from people in the gym. It's like they're documented with research that strength training is and resistance training is building into your longevity. With regards to how far you take it, I think going all the way to failure creates a certain amount of inflammation that that you need to recover from and can take longer to recover from. And so I don't think it's totally necessary to get the benefit. It's if you do it, fine, maybe limit that.
Mhm.
There's what builds muscle and strength is something called mechanical tension. And so if you're mechanical tension is like maybe if you pushed a set too close to failure, you felt that involuntary slowing of the rep speed. So you're moving through it, you're moving through those reps, and all of a sudden, even though you're using maximal effort, all of a sudden the rep speed starts to slow down. You just can't complete that movement quite as quick, even though you're using the same amount of effort you did from the beginning. And so those last 4 to 6 reps usually before failure, where you start feeling that mechanical tension when things are slowing down. That mechanical tension is what stimulates more protein to be stored in the muscle fiber. So if you're getting a few of those, you've stimulated the addition of protein to the muscle fiber. So you can come up to within 1 or 2 reps of failure, get the stimulation you're after, but without the inflammation that can come from a set full of sets to fail or a workout full of sets to failure.
Mhm.
And so there's where I think it's a sweet spot. Like if you're doing a set you would fail at 10, you might stop at 8 or 9. And you can usually feel that. But getting those few reps in of mechanical tension where it's slowing down, but not going all the way the last rep, that's the sweet spot for lifting, and you're going to get the benefit. And again, 1 or 2 sets of that, and check that exercise off the list. You've gotten 80% of the stimulation you're going to get from it compared to getting 6 of them. You're doing 6 sets. So it's it's really doesn't have to be difficult to get what you need from resistance training in a probably a 40-45 minute workout, and no one's having to drag you off the gym floor because you're still going to feel energetic. You're still going to have your your you're not going to be wiped out. Let me put it that way. It doesn't have to look like the end of an hour-long HIIT routine,
Mhm.
where you're just completely exhausted, wiped out, and 3 hours later you're like, "Where's the ice cream?" or you can't pass the donuts without like twitching
Mhm.
because your body's trying to compensate and replace all those calories and the cortisol stimulating
Mhm.
hunger. It just you don't have to leave it all out on the gym floor.
Absolutely. And going off of that, because of course, diet and nutrition is absolutely a crucial part of that. And for so many women who are just exhaustively working or taking care of families, like the first thing that you often reach for is like those processed foods, the
Yeah.
sugars, unfortunately, and which also affect cortisol. Can you talk about how to integrate better choices without feeling like you have to go all the way to the other extreme of being like completely,
Oh,
clean?
well, I definitely recommend whole single
Hmm.
ingredient food to be 90% of your diet.
Hmm.
Um, as we look back, quick history lesson, you go back
Hmm.
to 1901, the obesity rate was 1%. Early 1900s, most cardiologists never saw a heart attack or heart disease. It was so rare. In 1930, so just 100 years ago, the type 2 diabetes only impacted about 1/3 of 1%. So like
Hmm.
0.3% of the population. So this current level of metabolic disease we're seeing with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease is new. We've created it in the last 100 years. You know what else we created in the last 100 years? Processed food. We
Hmm.
process the processed seed oils, the highly processed grains that are not made the way our ancestors treated grains, and the and a lot of processed sugar. And you combine processed fat, processed sugar, grains. You've got this metabolic bomb.
Hmm.
Anytime you combine sugar or carbs and fat in a large amounts in one food and a low protein, you're got a fat storage situation going on there. When you have processed food like that with the seed oils and the chemicals and all the other ingredients that we have in these foods, you create a level of oxidative stress that we've never seen before from our food. When we metabolize food, there's a little bit of oxidative stress, but it's because it's coming in a whole food matrix where there's antioxidants and other food chemicals in that matrix. those antioxidants can offset the oxidative stress from metabolism that's normal. And we don't have the level of oxidative stress or metabolic disease, but we've created foods because we've extracted them, like the seed oils, for instance,
Mhm.
from the original source. So these fats within a nut, within a fish, within a seed, um, they're intact, they're stable, they haven't started oxidizing, and they have antioxidants in there like vitamin E and so forth. They're keeping them stable. So even when you consume them, you have the antioxidants coming on board. When they've
Mhm.
extracted these from the food matrix, one, they begin to oxidize immediately because they're out of their protective food, and the antioxidants generally don't follow them.
Mhm.
So what we have is over time of processed foods is the buildup of foods that create a lot more oxidative stress, and these without the antioxidants, and so this buildup of oxidative stress impacts our mitochondria, which then through a process I won't go too far into, but leads to basically your mitochondria make your energy. And so
Mhm.
if they're damaged, you make less energy, which means your brain says, hey, we got a problem. Turn on the hunger hormones, tell the liver to start spitting out some blood sugar. And by the way, don't it tells the liver don't respond to insulin. When the insulin is released to take that sugar away, liver's supposed to shut off the sugar, and it doesn't. And so we have this process of elevated blood sugar, elevated insulin, elevated hunger hormones. Not fun. That's
Yeah.
disease. That's
Mhm.
diabetes. But we have it coming as a baseline, which then leads to the fat gain. So it's not the fat gain or the fat or being obese that leads to these things. It is this chemical process that begins in our mitochondria from these processed foods that leads to a limited access to body fat, elevated blood sugar, most of which is being stored as body fat, and increased hunger hormones to offset the damage from the oxidative stress. That leads to the disease. So I hope that wasn't too sciencey, but
No, it's
I
good.
want people to understand it's not just
Yeah.
correlative. It's not just, oh, the
Right.
timing of these foods and the timing of the increase of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity.
Mhm.
There's a mechanism of impact on the our very energy system, which throws the whole system out basically out of whack to
Mhm.
start trying to offset the damage and create more energy for these cells that are
Yeah.
suffering, trying to dealing with this oxidative stress
Mhm.
from our food, and we've created it.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, um, you can eat a balanced diet. You don't have to do an extreme diet to be
Mhm.
healthy. You might do some hacks, some tweaks, some things that you feel like will work for you, and that's your experimentation to
Mhm.
reverse something or to make a quick weight loss. If you want to do that, realize those things are not, in my opinion, long-term solutions because your body is so adaptive. It will adapt to an energy deficiency
Mhm.
or a nutrient deficiency, sometimes by lowering your thyroid, lowering your metabolism.
Mhm.
And so they may work for a short time, but eventually, like a low calorie diet.
Mhm.
You're only on a low calorie diet. If you're on a low calorie diet for 6 months, by the end of 6 months, you're no longer on a low calorie diet. Your body's adapted to that.
Mhm.
Now it's
Mhm.
just your normal calorie diet.
Mhm.
Um, so if we were all still eating whole cuts of meat, whole food, fruit, veggie, grain, whatever, like a potato, white rice, that kind of thing, we wouldn't have metabolic disease
Mhm.
because we have 10,000 years of history, recorded history of eating these foods without an epidemic of metabolic disease. This is so new. Um, so the simple version is if 90% of your diet is coming from whole single ingredient food, and if you make something, put it together in your own kitchen, and you can count, usually most things are like 4 or 5 ingredients that you
Mhm.
pull out of your fridge, that all foods that existed 150 years ago,
Mhm.
you're going to be doing really well.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
but the current diet is 65% in the US of processed food.
Mhm.
And these seed oils are making up 30% of the average American's total calories,
Mhm.
which didn't exist. These oils didn't exist 150 years ago. And now suddenly they're 30% of our calories. To me, even if you don't get the science of it, there's enough correlation there. There's enough coincidence that makes me say, maybe I want to hold off on including these as a major part of my diet
Mhm.
because before these, we didn't have disease. And once we got them, we did.
Yeah. 100%. I appreciate your explanation so much. And it just, it's like you can see the money that's made off of this too, where
Oh,
now we have a very sick community. Now we add on more medications, the fix the weight, quote, fix the weight. And then you're just perpetuating this vicious cycle. And it's very sad. And like going back to what we started with, like you have to be your own advocate. Like it's,
Yes,
if you listen to the masses, unfortunately, it's not in your best interest. So I appreciate your explanation. And it's just, it's definitely something that starts within with each person making a choice of like, I want to choose differently for myself. Yeah.
100%.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have, this will be you. And this, and as a
Hmm.
parent, think about how this impacts your kids. Think
Hmm.
about the example you're setting for your kids. And let me tell you something, it doesn't get any easier keeping up with them when you get in your
Hmm.
40s and your 50s.
Yeah.
Um, and you want to be there for grandkids. But set the example. I've got 3 kids in their 20s.
Hmm.
They all cook,
Hmm.
which is a little bit rare for your average 20 something year old these
Yeah.
days. My 25-year-old son will text me and ask me how I made this certain thing with, and where did I get this? And, we have one little, latecomer in our family. Our youngest is only 13. Well, the others are in their 20s.
Hmm.
And of course, it's dealing with that whole teenage
Yeah.
thing again. And we were one time on phone talking to our daughter, and she was talking to him. She said, "I know they're weird. I know they're weird, and they tell you to eat all sorts of things you don't want to eat. But trust me, they know what they're talking about." I almost fell over because she was the toughest one.
Yeah.
And now, at this point, a few years ago, at 26, 27, telling her 10-year-old brother, like, listen to our parents. They know what they're talking about. They just trust me. I know they're weird, but. And so it was like, okay, okay. It's like, do we overdo it? Do we break them to any therapy, or did they actually, are they gonna, when they get old enough, are they gonna actually, put these habits to work when the time is right for them to feel they need them?
Hmm.
And thankfully, it
Hmm.
worked,
Yeah.
and they all pay attention to their health, and they pay attention to how they eat, and they exercise, and it's just and it's on their own, and they're asking us for advice, and that's rewarding to know that
Mhm.
I passed on a habit or a example of
Mhm.
health to my kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed Milet talks about that, where most things are caught, not taught. You can teach them all the right things, but they're going to be watching you as an example, and they're going to live off of that example. So it's so powerful. And here's a testament to that example that you've lived and now has been passed on, and hopefully will
Yeah.
continue on to the next generation after them. So it's powerful. And one thing I want to go into, because this is a big thing where like when you start to make changes, so many people rely on willpower. Like, this is it. I'm going to put on the calendar. I'm going to
Mm.
start this day and I am going to succeed. And then unfortunately, most drop off after about 30 days or if not sooner. Can you talk about the driving force to making long-lasting changes and why willpower might not be the best option?
Yeah, there's willpower will run out of gas. I
Hmm.
mean, it just doesn't, when you're doing something difficult or making a big change.
Hmm.
Willpower will only get you so far. It might get you started.
Hmm.
Use it to
Yeah.
set yourself up for success. But the best thing to do is to set up a strategy and a schedule that's sustainable,
Hmm.
that doesn't create more stress than it's alleviating. So if you're making a big change, maybe you start with one or at most two big changes at a time. Like
Hmm.
sometimes your goals shouldn't necessarily be weight. You might have a long-term weight loss goal, but your short-term goals are, you know, resistance training 2 or 3 times this week, making
Hmm.
sure I walk at least a mile, 4 times this week.
Hmm.
And it's those habit changes where you're like, okay, that's your first goal. That's on your schedule. Put it on your schedule it in,
Hmm.
make it sustainable. With food, it's as much as don't, if you know you shouldn't be eating it and it's difficult for you, don't put it in the house. I mean, you just have to not put it in the house or put it out of sight. It's in the garage fridge. And if they want it, they go out there and get it.
Hmm.
But you have to set up yourself for the easiest possible path. I mean, you see all these fitness competitors doing food prep. That may seem extreme that on Sunday they spend all day cooking and packing their food. But if you don't pack your lunch or make sure you know the night before, hey, I'm going to have this for breakfast and it's here,
Hmm.
it probably won't happen because you get in the moment and you're hurrying. There's a little bit on the front end where you have to like plan ahead and go, I'm taking this. This is what I'm, because you've set, it's as simple as setting out your clothes, set out your gym clothes, make
Hmm.
sure you have clean clothes for work, right? You know where your car keys are. It's that simple. It's like little systems
Hmm.
in your schedule that make the moment when you have to make that decision easier. I think about the tech guys who like live in black t-shirts, jeans, and maybe they throw on a coat if they got to be on camera or talk to a thing. But they just I don't want to. I mean, remove decision fatigue because that's what it is. It's decision fatigue, and you remove the opportunity for so much decision fatigue because we all get it, especially as the day goes on. They
Hmm.
have all the same, and you don't have to go to the extreme, but they have all the same. Like they have 7 black t-shirts
Hmm.
and the 7 jeans and a couple, blue blazer, black blazer, maybe, you
Hmm.
know, and it seems like an odd example, but at some point, decision fatigue can be countered on the front end when you realize that's what you hit and you prepare ahead by simplifying that task with as few obstacles as possible to accomplishing it in the moment because you
Hmm.
prepared ahead of time and you do it for your kids. you
Hmm.
you you know most a lot of people, I mean, we always, you pack their lunch, or you make sure their clothes are ready, or you do their laundry, or you set them up so that as they go through their day they have what they need, but you're not doing it for yourself.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that doesn't equate to success long term. That equates to rundown, you know
Hmm.
uh, poorly fed,
Hmm.
um, and again, not just not taking care of yourself. I mean, everything from your workout, your recovery time, your food, work it into your schedule. It's
Hmm.
just until it becomes second, it becomes your lifestyle, and it
Hmm.
will eventually.
Yeah.
But that's my bet. It's just like eliminate that risk of decision fatigue
Hmm.
before you get there.
Yeah, so helpful because I mean, so many people could listen to this and be like, oh no, I need to overhaul my life. I'm not doing enough. I should have this. But it's like when you talk about it's actually removing some things from your life, it's not always adding. And then you can make those micro shifts that can make a big difference. It just
Yeah.
makes it more accessible to, many people who are feeling overwhelmed in this moment, but
Mhm.
realizing the importance of these shifts because long term, you are a healthier parent, you're a healthier person
Yeah.
for you and everyone around you, and you're coming from a place of wholeness, not just from the scraps of maybe what you've been giving yourself.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
life is hard enough. It's busy enough. When you have
Yeah.
kids, it's, if and career, it's like it's exhausting.
Hmm.
But there's the things you can do to help yourself succeed better at that and at your health. They don't have to be at odds with each other. In
Hmm.
fact, they shouldn't be at odds with each other.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they should be in parallel. And
Absolutely.
if you can think of it that way, sometimes it's a mindset. Sometimes it's like, well, if I do this, I won't get to have this for my kids. I won't be there for my. No, you will be there. You'll be
Hmm.
setting example for them, and you'll have more energy for them. And you won't be
Yeah.
so exhausted when they come to you at the end of the day. You'll have you'll have more patience.
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, you'll have
100%.
more energy, and then when they go to bed, you have time for. If you're married, you have time for your spouse, and that's important. That's
Hmm.
so vital to have energy for your relationships,
Hmm.
that and instead of all of your energy and then stress going into the demands of the day, of the schedule of the day, with this career, getting them off to school, kids, and all the appointments, and if that's where all of your best energy is going, it's responsibilities. We all have them. We don't neglect responsibilities,
Hmm.
but there's a way to have more of you for those relationships as well, and we can't neglect the relationships in place of responsibilities. They again, they should be in parallel.
Yeah, I love that. And such a great point that going from either or to both and knowing that like that rising tide raises all ships. It's like when you sleep well, think about how much more tolerance and buffering you can do during the day. It's just like one little piece, but every aspect of that just makes every other aspect easier. So it's just amazing. And it's such a huge point there for anyone who's like, okay, how do I integrate this? But it's like you literally can just give yourself a more expansive
Yeah.
perspective on life when you start to honor yourself and your health. So I so
Mhm.
appreciate that. And for someone who wanted to connect with you, and I know you said you had a great resource that they can reach, can you share that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's called Free 40 Plan. It's at free40plan.com. So it's just
Mhm.
basically how I would kind of a quick overview, a few pages of how I would approach a client with diet,
Mhm.
exercise, recovery, and a few recommendations on. if you're thinking about hormone replacement therapy, just some things to think about, like some targets for what optimal ranges would be, and biomarkers like fasting insulin to include on your blood work that your doctor may not, but it's an early precursor, early warning of metabolic disease forming, and how to look at your thyroid. So just a few notes and a short overview, but it's free40plan.com. If you're looking for my socials, I'm pretty active on Instagram at Zane Griggs Fitness, but zanegriggs.com has all my socials listed. So if that's, you can find me there, find where to link with me there. But the free 40 plan, I think, is a great resource for people who are looking just to get a little more insight as to like what we've discussed today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'll put everything in the show notes. So definitely grab that resource, connect with Zane. I am so grateful for everything you shared today. I know it's going to benefit someone. Just plant that seed of that they can make those changes in their life and experience life in it through a different perspective. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Again, for anyone who's listening, share this episode. If you found benefit in it, share with someone who could also benefit from it. And again, thank you so much for tuning into Rewiring Health. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If there was something in this episode that really resonated with you or a message that stuck with you, please share it with someone else. It's only through sharing these messages that we can start to rewire our minds to feel empowered and live the life that we truly desire. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to Rewiring Health.